I'm Kyla George, and I will be speaking about pragmatics. When I think of pragmatics, I think of the question why. Why am I saying what I'm saying? How am I saying the thing that I'm trying to communicate? And where? What is the context? What is my relationship to the person I'm speaking to? That's all the things that I think of when I think of pragmatics. Um, Merriam-Webster defines pragmatics as concerned with the relationship of sentences to the environment in which they occur. So the sentences that you say and you're communicating, it's their relationship to the environment and the context where they happen. That's how Merriam-Webster defines it. Our class text says that pragmatics deals with norms of conversation. What are the cultural norms, the social norms? What is normal for a conversation in this context? That's our class text, how that defines it. And the Encyclopedia Britannica defines pragmatics as dealing with both literal and non-literal components of language meaning. So semantics, as opposed to pragmatics, semantics only deals with the sentence meanings. And so pragmatics is about both the sentence meaning, both the actual words that you're saying and the non-literal components of what is happening around the sentence. What are the contexts? What is the relationship between the speaker and the audience? Where is this happening? What is your tone of voice? What kind of facial expressions? What kind of body language are you giving while you speak? All of those things can affect the meaning of the message that you're trying to say, which is different from semantics, which is just talking about the sentences. This is talking about all of the hidden meanings, about the whole picture, the whole package of your message. So these components, the literal and non-literal components, are governed by both physical and social contextual principles. It's about the context. It's about both where it's happening, the physical, and the social. Who am I talking to? What is our relationship? Is this person I'm speaking to old or young? Is this person I'm speaking to, is it my boss? Is it my parent? Is it my peer? Those are kind of social clues. Or what is the cultural background of people? Where are we? Are we in a different country, or are we in the United States? Those kinds of contexts. There's all sorts of contexts that go into governing these components of language meaning, according to Encyclopedia Britannica. So, what does this look like? So, here's an example. This little comic. Sometimes I forget how to do small talk. So, we're talking about small talk, something casual. We're not trying to get into some deep meaning about this. So, this is just small talk. Maybe you just met someone, you know, hey man, what's up? How you been? Well, so he just said, how have you been? Casual question. He says, well, he waits. He's thinking. He's thinking. He's thinking some more. It's kind of weird for a casual conversation. So this guy says, you okay? And he responds, yeah, it's just an interesting question. I'm just trying to decide what best sums up my. He goes on and on. Hey, conversation. He snaps him out of it. Oh, right, I'm fine. You? And he comes back with the appropriate response. So he's thinking, this is kind of a long pause. It's kind of odd for a small talk conversation because he's thinking about something really deep. He's taking this, how have you been, as a literal, tell me about everything that's happened to you lately. But really, in this small talk conversation about the context, is small talk. It's a conversation. And so he says, oh, right, I'm fine. So this is the more appropriate response because it's just a casual question. This person had to realize that this person was not trying to ask him about every detail of his day. But at first he didn't get that, and then later he did. So there's an example of pragmatics. You need to know what's your context. Who are you talking to? What are you trying to talk about? What is the other person trying to talk about? And all of those things go into this. Some other examples, for instance, put out the candles. If I said put out the candles, that could mean literally take all of the candles and put them outside. Literally put the candles out. Or you could bring candles into a room if there aren't candles around and I want them there to be. You could bring candles into a room and place them on different surfaces. Or I could mean extinguish the candle flames. It's put them out. Take away the flames. Take out the fire. So all of those could be the same meaning of put out the candles, but it depends on the context. Where are the candles? Are there candles already in the room? Are the candles lit? Are they not? All of those things could tell you which one of these meanings it could be. Or I'm hot. If I said I'm hot, that could mean I feel warm and it's hot in here. Or it could mean I think I look attractive. Or if I said it in a really angry voice, then it could mean I'm hangry. Or it can mean I'm angry. I'm hot. I'm angry. All of those things, all of those could be a meaning for I'm hot. Same sentence, different meanings. And it depends on your context. Is it warm inside? Is it cold? Did you make me angry? Did you do something to me that could have upset me? All of these things could mean the same for I'm hot. I'm hot could mean all of these different ones. Or the dishes are dirty. If I say, hey, the dishes are dirty, you could understand that as merely a descriptive statement about the state of the dishes. You could say, yes, the dishes are dirty. Or more likely, it's an indirect request. I'm saying, hey, the dishes are dirty because I want you to do the dishes. And I want you to clean the dishes and make them clean. So it depends on our relationship, but this is more likely to be an indirect request. If you don't have that prior knowledge, the prior pragmatic knowledge that statement could be an indirect request, then you might misunderstand and think that I'm just saying, yes, dirty things are on the dishes and not do anything. And then there could be a breakdown in communication. These are all examples of how pragmatics could appear in daily life. And this can be especially difficult for English language learners who don't have this prior knowledge in English. They might have it in their first language, but it hasn't transferred into their second language. So a lot of these things they might take literally, which is why it's really important to try to avoid using idioms like kill two birds with one stone or put the candles out. It could mean so many different things. But all of this to say, it's all about the context. It's all about pragmatics in context. So our other class text, Diaz says, pragmatics is the study of communication in context. That is the key there. All of those examples that I spoke about before, they all depend on where you are, what's your relationship. It's all about the context. So in pragmatics, there are 3 major communication skills according to our cross-cultural handbook, Diaz textbook. You can use language for functions. For different functions, what are you using for? What are you using language to do? What's your goal? You can, your communication skill could be appropriately adapting or changing language based on the situation. What is appropriate language for the context you're in? Or another communication skill is following conversational rules. There's rules that we have and we follow in our conversations, and they're unspoken, but we understand them because of our cultural backgrounds, depending on where you are and what your context is. So the first communication skill is using language for function. So language is used for functions or to meet communicative goals. So what are you trying to do when you're speaking? What is the message goal when you're speaking with someone? So Halliday, he came up with 7 functions of language. So one is instrumental. It's to meet your needs, to get what you want, and that's what you're using language for. Another one is regulatory, to use language to control other people's behavior. Maybe it's a parent trying to control the behavior of the child, or if you're leading a group, you're trying to regulate the behaviors of the people in the group. Informative is to communicate information. You're trying to give information to someone else. Interactional, to establish relationships socially. How do you make friends? What is an appropriate way to make friends, for instance? You can do this to cooperate with other people. That would be an interactional function. Or personal, to express individuality, how to show your personality to someone else. How do you do that? What is the languaging functioning there? It's personal, to express your individuality. Heuristic, to investigate and acquire knowledge. So informative, you're communicating information, you're giving information. Then heuristic, you're trying to take in information. You're investigating and acquiring knowledge. And then imaginative, expressing fantasy and creativity. You can tell stories. You can do skits. All of those things can be imaginative functions of language. So all those functions occur in the appropriate situations. So this is kind of a quality of those functions. So to appropriately adapt and change language is according to the context. So appropriateness is whether or not language is perceived as suitable for a certain audience, purpose, and context. Audience, who are you talking to? Purpose, why are you saying it? In context, where are you? What's the cultural background? What is the context of the situation? So all of those factors can decide whether or not language is perceived as suitable or appropriate. And the speech register shows that appropriateness. So in a speech register, you're considering the age, gender, status, and cultural background of the listener. All of those factors will tell you what kind of speech register you're using. So speech register could be formal. Formal, you're very grammatically sound, formally grammatically sound. You use your word choice is different. You wouldn't use slang in a formal speech register. Informal speech register, you might be able to use slang, and you could use like contractions and things, and that would be a formal speech register. So this is how are you speaking based on who you're speaking to. So for example, these 2 sentences: I hereby declare this meeting closed and wish you a happy new year, versus let's call it a day and let's hope 2003 is not going to be as chaotic as 2002. Both of these sentences are appropriate for a chairperson of a meeting or a leader of a meeting to say, maybe in a workplace. Though they both could be said by someone of that nature. The first one, though, this sentence is in a formal register. It's very grammatical and very the grammar is perfect. It perfectly made, and hereby declare is very formal words to use to say I'm ending this meeting. So this would be more appropriate for a supervisor and employee relationship. Maybe your boss is speaking to you, and they're leading the meeting with some employees, and that's how they end the meeting. The second one, though, this one is a lot more informal. So maybe peers are having an informal meeting about a project, and so someone says, "Let's call it a day." And that's a very informal way to close a meeting. Let's hope 2003 is not gonna. This would not be formally correct in grammar. Gonna would not be a formally sound word grammatically for this sentence, but it is in this context because it's an informal speech register. So this sentence is a lot more appropriate for a peer relationship. It wouldn't be as appropriate if an employee was telling this to their boss. This would not be as appropriate as this sentence would be. And then there's conversation rules. There's a lot of unspoken rules about conversations that we use when we're speaking. So, for instance, we take turns. Turn taking is when and how long do we speak and listen? What kind of pauses are there when we're speaking? How long do we stay on the same topic? How long do we wait until you can speak again? How do you enter and exit a conversation? Do you just butt in and start speaking, or do you have to wait for a pause? Some people groups wait to speak after a clear pause and then speak, but then other people groups, their cultural norms in conversations say that they can speak when a speaker is winding down. In some cultures, that would be seen as rude and that they're interrupting, but in those cultures, it's perfectly okay to do that. So this is really important to know when we're talking about English language learners, because they might have a different cultural norm than we do, and you might think that they're trying to interrupt you, but that's just how they've been taught as they're growing up in their L1 language. And then another conversation rule is focusing on a topic. How long do you stay on the same topic? In the comic that we saw before, this is a good example of this. The guy that was being asked, "How's it going?" He was about to go and speak forever and ever and ever about his day, and then the other guy said, "Hey, we're not taking a long time. This is a casual small talk conversation. We're not trying to stay here forever." So how long to focus on a topic? You have to know what the context and what the situation calls for. What's the purpose of the conversation? Are you trying to have a deep conversation where you can speak forever about your day? Or are you just having small talk and you need to keep it short and concise? Speaking too long about the happenings of the day when asked, "How's it going?" that can break down communication like we saw in that comic strip earlier. And that can go for all sorts of topics. How quickly do you change topics too? How do you keep interest in a topic? And then there's conversational repair. When communication does break down, how do you restore it? How do you get back on topic? How do you become clear again? How do you restore that communication that's been broken down? So for instance, if I am telling a story about Susie, and you know me, but you know that I have an Aunt Susie and a sister named Susie. How do you know which one I'm talking about, because I just said I'm talking about Susie. So I'm telling the story about Susie, and I say, yeah, Susie went to the store and she picked up some granola bars. And you don't know which Susie I'm talking about. So you might ask who the pronoun is referring to. You might say, "Oh yeah, that's a really cool story. Was that your sister or your Aunt Susie?" And I might say, "My aunt." And then conversation can be repaired and restored because now you're clear on who we're talking about. So that's an example of this, but there's all sorts of ways to repair a conversation, and those may vary again by cultural norms and backgrounds of the speaker and listener. So, in order to attain communicative success, Greece came up with a cooperative principle, and that's that listeners and speakers work together for conversational success. They're trying to cooperate. They want to succeed in communicating. So they are going to try and do their best to be as clear as possible, avoid breakdowns in communication as much as possible because they're cooperating together. And this is a principle that Greece believed was key to being successful in a conversation. So his cooperative principle includes 4 maxims. There's the maxim of quality, the maxim of quantity, the maxim of relation. Can't see it there. You'll see it in a second. There it is. Maxim of relation and maxim of manner. These are the 4 maxims that govern the cooperative principle. In order to cooperate and in order to work together to communicate, people need to follow these 4 maxims for conversational success. And that's what he contributed to pragmatics. So the maxim of quality is about, let me make this smaller. The maxim of quality is about being truthful. Don't say things that you think are false. Don't say things that aren't true, and don't say something that you do not have enough evidence for. If you do say these things, then conversation may break down. So, for instance, if you're baking a cake and you want to borrow some sugar from me, don't say that you want to borrow some salt. If you want to borrow some salt, don't say that you want to borrow some sugar. Don't expect to be handed the other ingredient, because whatever you're asking me for, that's the ingredient that I'm going to assume that you actually want. Don't say false things. Because if you did say, I want sugar, but you actually wanted salt, then there will be no communication. I can't read your mind and I don't know what you want. And so I'm going to hand you what you asked for. The maxim of quality, be informative, is making your contribution as informative as required. Be informative. Give as much information that you need in order to communicate your message. And don't make your contribution more informative than is required. So don't give too much information, but give enough. So example, if someone asks for directions, then give them all of the essential directional steps, but leave out the details about, for instance, the kinds of plants they will see on the way. If someone asks me to go to the library, if they ask me how to get there, then I'm not going to say, yes, you're going to walk down the street and then you're going to turn left. And the building that will be on your left was built in the 1800s. And there's this beautiful tree there that was planted as well. And then once you see those, then you'll go to the right. That's too much information. The listener will get confused. The maxim of relation is to be relevant. Make sure all of the information you give is relevant and omit anything extraneous. Don't give information that is not needed to understand your point. So if someone's, back to the cake analogy, if someone's mixing ingredients for a cake and they're in the mixing process, putting the ingredients together, don't offer them an oven mitt yet. That's not relevant to this particular step in the process. And there's the maxim of manner. Maxim of manner is to be clear. Avoid obscure expressions that the listener might not understand. Something that you say, like the idioms for English language learner. With English language learners, they might not understand those because to them, those are obscure. Avoid ambiguous information that could be misinterpreted. Words with multiple meanings. Try to avoid those words because the listener might not understand the exact thing that you're trying to tell them. And be brief and concise. Don't give too much information, but just keep it to what needs to be understood. And in how information is presented, be orderly and logical. Put the information in order that's easy to understand. Don't keep going back between steps or anything. Be clear. Those are the 4 maxims that if one of these maxims is not met, that Greece proposes conversation will break down if one of these maxims is not met. So pragmatics, you have a lot of theory, but how can we do this in practice? How can we help students practice pragmatics? What can we do to help them? So that's some activities that we have. So 1, you can let students practice language functions, the ones we were talking about earlier. So for instance, to practice the instrumental function, you can have students analyze advertisements to learn how people use language to get what they want. And they can practice looking for this instrumental function when someone is communicating to reach a goal. And then they can practice giving an advertisement to use language to get what they want. Or to practice the regulatory function, you can allow students to be in charge of different groups and practice how to regulate other people's behavior through language for smooth group functioning. Or to practice appropriateness, another term that we were talking about earlier, you can role play to practice speech register. In small groups, you can prompt students to create conversations of maybe selling a product in different types of audiences. You could prompt them to sell a product with a peer, an adult, an elderly person, a child, a teacher. You can have them practicing selling a product to any of those people groups. And then have the students perform the conversations that they talked about in their groups. And it might be good to give each group a different prompt to have one group practicing selling a product to a child and one group practicing selling a product to an adult so that they can perform them, and then you can compare and discuss the differences between those speech registers. And then you can also practice with idioms. So for instance, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. That's an idiom that English language learners might not understand because of the literal and figurative meaning. So in order to tell the difference between these meanings, you could have students draw a picture of the literal meaning on one column. You could draw a picture of 2 birds and a stone is being thrown. And then on the other side of on the other column, you can have them write the actual non-literal meaning that we actually mean when we say killing 2 birds with 1 stone. And these columns can help them differentiate the correct meaning to say, this might mean the literal sense, but we probably mean this non-literal sense. And then this activity puts all of those smaller activities together. An activity in apologies. Students can be given little strips of paper with speech examples representing components of an apology. For instance, if I if I broke somebody's lamp. One strip would be explaining the situation. I'm so sorry, I broke your lamp. I was playing soccer in the living room. Another strip would promise that it won't happen again. I'm so sorry, this won't happen again. I'll make it up to you. And then another one might be taking responsibility. A strip that says, I'm so sorry, it was my fault. I shouldn't have been playing soccer. And so those are different components of an apology, but students can mix up those strips into different orders to find different variations of apologies. So the apology could go in the order of explaining, I was playing soccer and broke your lamp. I promise it won't happen again. It was all my fault. Or you could put it in the order of, I'm so sorry. This was all my fault. I broke your lamp by playing soccer. I promise it will never happen again. And those kinds of reordering can show students that there's multiple ways to apologize. So to follow up in the activity, teachers can ask students to generate their own apologies based on different prompts, including dimensions like age, context, relationship, to also practice speech register during this activity. And they can write down their apologies or talk about them with their peers. And then they can practice in role play and compare and discuss, like we talked about earlier. But putting these together can help with writing apologies, with reading apologies, with listening to each other in the role play, and with speaking. So that's reading, writing, listening, and speaking is all practice in this activity. So some questions for you. So tell me about a time that you experienced a breakdown of communication. Sometime that you were trying to tell a message, or maybe someone else was trying to give you a message and it just didn't come across. It broke down, and you couldn't communicate clearly. Tell me about that time, and tell me, which of Greece's maxims would you attribute the breakdown? Why did it break down? What was the reason for you not being able to understand, or the listener not being able to understand you? And explain that. And then number 2, based on what you know, do you think that pragmatics has to be primarily taught or acquired? We learned before that that languages can be taught explicitly, or they can be acquired through just picking it up as you go along, and there's no explicit instruction. So do you think that pragmatics is a thing that has to be taught, that you have to explicitly teach, or do you think it can be acquired and picked up? We can support students in the classroom, but which method do you think is primarily that pragmatics is primarily gained? And we're talking about in a second language for English language learners. These are my references. Thank you for listening.